She was rejected in front of a crowd, not for what she said, not for what she did, but for the color of her skin. He tried to erase her in a heartbeat and ended up sealing his own fate. She came here searching for love, but what she found was the truth, a truth strong enough to shatter a century-old lie. Welcome to Heartland Stories. I'm Ethan Hale, and here I share true stories about honor, kindness, and quiet strength. Today, I want to tell you about a woman who came to a small town looking for a new beginning and ran headfirst into old prejudice. This isn't just a story about pain and humiliation. It's a story about how dignity can stand up to injustice, how truth, once spoken, can shake an entire community. It's a mirror whole generations have been too afraid to look into. Ready to see how one rejected woman changed an entire town forever? Then hit that like button, because we're just getting started. The train hissed to a stop, releasing steam and strangers onto the platform. Haven Creek greeted Naomi Brooks with sunlight and stares. Some indifferent, some cautious. She held her lace-trimmed suitcase just off the ground, gloves tight in her hand despite the warmth. A modest hat with a veil, a neat jacket, careful shoes, 6 months of letters, 3 weeks of travel, and all her hopes packed into one slim suitcase, and the man waiting for her at the end of those pages. Tom Banks stood at the edge of the platform, a bunch of cornflowers in hand. The moment he saw her, something in his face went hollow. He didn't smile, didn't step forward, didn't call her name, just turned pale, like he'd seen a ghost he hadn't prepared for. You're Naomi?" he murmured. She nodded. "And you're Tom. Your letters were beautiful. I read warmth between every line, warmth I desperately needed." He swallowed hard. This isn't going to work. You didn't say you were. You're black." Naomi didn't flinch. "And you didn't say you feared someone's skin more than your own loneliness." Heads began to turn. A station worker slowed his cart. An older couple paused mid-step. In a small town, even breathing too loud could draw attention. But this? A white man stepping back from a black woman. This was a full-blown performance. "You seem different in your letters," she whispered. "Honest. Lonely. Real. I can't. People here, they know me. I've got a store. A reputation. Please try to understand. I'll pay for a hotel. Or your ticket home. This was a mistake, but you'll find someone. Someone else." He pulled crumpled bills from his coat pocket. "Take this. I didn't mean to." Naomi didn't reach for the money. She stood tall, taller than before. "You didn't mean to? Or you didn't expect to see that hearts have no color, but your fear clearly does." Tom shrank. Whispers stirred through the air like wind through dry leaves. But before he could say another word, a new voice cut through the tension. Steady, clear, and cold. "This your plan, Tom? Invite a woman here like she's a package. Then leave her stranded when she turns out to be real." They both turned. A tall man, sun-worn and calm, stood just a few feet away. His coat was simple but fine, the kind of quiet wealth that didn't need to prove anything. His eyes, like steel traps. That's when Daniel Stanton stepped in, a man whose word in Haven Creek weighed more than money or tradition. And for Naomi, it wasn't just the end of a letter anymore. It was the beginning of something harder, something real, and it started with pain. "This your final answer, Tom?" Daniel asked again, locking eyes with the man who had just betrayed everything he claimed to believe. "You invited this woman here, wrote her, gave her your word. And now you're walking away because she doesn't fit your narrow little world." Tom clutched the bouquet like it might shield him. The petals shook, not from the wind, but from shame. "This isn't your business, Daniel. You don't understand. Haven Creek has its ways. People will talk. People always talk," Stanton shot back. "But I've known you 15 years, and today's the first time I'm ashamed to say it. You said you were looking for love, Tom. Now you're acting like a boy scared of his own heart." He turned to Naomi. His face softened, not with pity, but with respect. "Miss Brooks, if I may. I'm Daniel Stanton. I run a farm just outside of town. Big house. Too many empty rooms. You're a guest in this town, but you don't have to accept humiliation as part of your stay. If you're willing, I'd like to offer you a place to rest, just until you figure out what's next." Naomi didn't answer right away. She studied him, his posture, steady and grounded, his clothes, plain but precise. His voice, direct but not overbearing. Still, experience had taught her that kindness from strangers often came with a hook. And she'd been caught before. Tom stepped in, desperate now. "Daniel, you can't be serious. What are people gonna think?" Daniel gave a cold smile. "You mean the people who feed their families off my land?" "Yeah, I'd be real curious to hear what they have to say." For a long second, the station fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then Naomi nodded. "If what you're offering is a roof, not a bargain, then yes, I accept." And she walked away. Didn't look back. Left the man who became a stranger with just one sentence. Toward the man who, for now, was only a promise. But an honest one. Stanton's estate appeared suddenly, just beyond a bend in the gravel road, past a row of oak trees. The house sat on a rise, not flashy, but solid. An old Victorian frame of dark wood and stone, broad porches wrapping around its front. It didn't try to impress. It didn't have to. This was the kind of place built not to dazzle, but to last. When Naomi stepped inside, the scent of polished wood, old books, and faint jasmine filled her lungs. The foyer greeted her with quiet and warm light. Mrs. Hadley, the housekeeper, let her in polite, if not exactly welcoming. "I've prepared the blue room. Faces the south garden. It's the quietest," she said flatly, though not without a touch of respect. Naomi walked down a hallway where the walls were lined with 19th century paintings, each one worthy of a pause. She noticed quickly this house didn't flaunt its wealth. There was no showy opulence, just quiet depth, the worn spines of well-loved books, the fabric of the curtains, the upright piano resting in the corner of the sitting room. Dinner was served in a long, high-ceilinged dining room. A heavy table made of deep red oak. Daniel spoke sparingly. He didn't pry. Only once, while pouring tea, did he offer something personal. "My father was a banker out of Milwaukee. My mother taught night classes for colored girls before the war." He stirred his cup slowly. "After they passed, I moved south. Folks here thought I was strange. Now, they just tolerate me. Money talks louder than tradition, though not forever." Naomi nodded. She wasn't surprised that Stanton kept a certain distance. In his eyes lived the weariness of a man too often let down by people he once trusted. After the meal, he showed her the library. A tall room lined with books, walls breathing with the weight of time. "It was a place you could breathe in words instead of worry. No one in my family ever had the patience to make sense of all this," he said, gesturing at the rows of shelves. "If books are your thing, help yourself." Naomi ran her fingers along the spines, history, law, old maps, volumes of agricultural records. It didn't feel like a library. It felt like a case file. This house wasn't hiding anything. It was just waiting for someone to finally read it. And somewhere in that quiet waiting, a new chapter had already begun. At dawn, the house was still. A clean, aching kind of stillness, like the air after a long rain. Naomi hadn't slept. She lay staring at the molding on the ceiling, thoughts racing like a train that couldn't stop. A strange house, a strange town, and the weight of unfamiliar eyes. Then, a soft knock. Just once. And silence again. She rose and opened the door. There, neatly placed at her feet, was a tray. A steaming cup of tea, a small vase of lavender, and a folded napkin. No note. No explanation. Just warmth. It was the quiet work of Mrs. Hadley, Daniel's housekeeper. A woman with straight posture, strict manners, and eyes that carried a tiredness deeper than words. Naomi crouched down, wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, and closed her eyes. She never heard Hadley's footsteps retreat. The woman had vanished as silently as she came. But in that wordless gesture, there was more than courtesy. There was recognition, respect, and maybe, just maybe, a quiet reminder that Naomi wasn't completely alone here. When the house settled into that pre-dawn silence, Naomi knelt quietly beside her suitcase. It sat in the corner like a monument to everything left behind. From the outside, it looked like any other piece of luggage, creased clothes, a few books, some old letters. But the truth was hidden deeper. In a false bottom her grandfather had built with his own hands years ago. She pried it open with her fingernail. Behind the wooden panel lay a thin bundle tied with a faded ribbon. Carefully, like it was holy, she unwrapped it. Out came maps, aged and brittle. Copies of land deeds. letters written in shaky script, and one document with the state seal and a governor's signature, dated 1866. A land grant. The very land where most of Haven Creek now stood. Her grandfather had protected it his whole life. Knowing the truth would be needed someday, Naomi hadn't come here chasing romance. She came to reclaim what was stolen. Not for revenge. For memory. For the future. She placed the papers back in their hiding place, lowered the suitcase lid, and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence in the room rang in her ears. But something deeper stirred inside her, something rising, slow and steady, like resolve. Others still saw her as a stranger, but she was already mapping the past and getting ready to turn the present upside down. That night, lying in the blue room's unfamiliar bed, Naomi closed her eyes. And just like that, she was back in a summer from long ago, on the porch of an old house in Mobile where the heat shimmered off every surface. She sat at the feet of her grandfather, Samuel Ellis. His voice was soft, but carried weight, like the steady rhythm of a train wheel on steel. In his hand, a silver ring he rolled between his fingers as if it held all the stories he never wrote down. "See that land, baby girl?" he said, pointing to the slope where the apricot trees grew. "It was ours. Until the committee folks came. Said the papers were gone. But I remember. My daddy worked this land barehanded. Couldn't read a word, but he signed that paper just the same. Then it burned. Or went missing. Don't forget that. History disappears unless you protect it." 10-year-old Naomi hadn't understood it all. But the feel of his hand on her head. The look in his eyes, full of pride and stubborn fire. That stayed with her longer than any lesson. Now, lying in the quiet of someone else's house, she whispered into the dark, "I remember, Grandpa, and I came back for what should never have been taken." Naomi woke early. The house was still asleep, but the library was waiting. She walked to it like a place of worship, slow, reverent, heart beating just a little harder. The door creaked gently as it opened, and the room breathed her in. Books, dust, wood, and something else, too. The feeling that memory itself lived here. Shelves stretched to the ceiling. Ladders on wheels. A desk stained with old ink. A card catalog with worn-out handles. Daniel met her at the doorway, a mug of coffee in hand, face as calm and focused as ever. "I figured." He nodded toward a pile of papers and scrolls on the desk. "You might want to make some sense of this mess. My folks gathered a lot, but they never got around to organizing any of it. You seem like someone who likes order." "I like it when history doesn't get lost," Naomi said quietly. He gave a slow nod. "Then it's all yours. No one else comes in here. Far as I'm concerned, this room belongs to you now." And with that, he left, leaving her alone with the silent witnesses of long-buried truth. At first, she simply sorted, wiped off dust, labeled things, made notes. But by the second day, familiar names started popping up. Ellis, Green, Watson. Names she remembered from her grandfather's stories. Then came land records, ownership lists, court filings. One document stood out, a meeting transcript dated 1871, signed by the Settlement Development Committee. Not a single black name on the page. Not one. Even though her grandfather always said his father sat across from Union surveyors, negotiating land after the war. Naomi started making copies, bookmarking pages, tracking dates. By the time the rest of the house was waking up, she'd already been at work for hours, surrounded by ledgers and maps. One morning, Daniel peeked in. She didn't even notice him at first. "Looks like you're deep in it," he said, offering a faint smile. "There's too much left unsaid," Naomi murmured, eyes still on the page. "And the unsaid stuff? That's where the truth usually hides." He nodded, didn't ask questions, just quietly stepped back out. The library he'd once seen as a forgotten heirloom. Naomi had turned it into a weapon, and the town outside. It was just a matter of time before everything buried in these walls rose into the light. One slow afternoon, with golden light cutting through the shutters of the library in quiet stripes, a knock came at the door. Naomi wasn't expecting anyone. "Miss Brooks." The voice was familiar, too familiar. She set her papers aside and stepped into the hallway. There, on the threshold, stood Tom Banks, hat in his hands, eyes darting. His jacket was wrinkled, His throat moved like he'd been trying to swallow something the whole way over. "Tom," she said evenly, "what brings you here?" He tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach his mouth. It collapsed halfway. "I just wanted to make sure you'd settled in all right. Folks in town are talking, wondering, about a single woman living in a bachelor's house." "Folks in town," she cut in, arms folded. "Or you?" He looked down. "Does it matter? I'm part of the church committee. We just want to avoid any kind of scandal." "It's concern." "Concern?" Her tone sharpened. "Before or after you left me standing on that platform like a misdelivered package?" Tom paled. "It was an emotional moment. I didn't know what to do. I was trying to save you from disappointment." Naomi didn't move. "Or save yourself from judgment." Silence thickened between them. His face flushed with shame. But behind his eyes, there was no regret. Only bruised pride. "I heard you're working in the library now," he said, switching gears like a man trying to back out of a dead-end road. "I am," she nodded. "Daniel asked me to help sort through the archives. His family left behind a lot of paper. And a lot of secrets." He took a small step forward. "And what exactly are you looking for, Naomi?" "The truth, Tom. That's something you're still afraid of." He didn't answer, just gave a slight nod, clutched his hat tighter, and turned away without another word. Naomi watched him go through the half-open door. There was no strength in his back, only the stiff posture of a man trying to preserve a reputation he'd already lost. The next morning, Mrs. Hadley handed Naomi a folded note from Daniel. Just one line, written in a sharp, steady hand. "If you're willing, the key is yours. The library's waiting for its keeper." Pinned to the paper was a small, heavy key. The kind that didn't just open doors. It held trust. That's how Naomi Brooks became the librarian of the Stanton estate. Officially? Temporary. Unofficially? She had full access. Even to the lower cabinets with locked drawers and dust-laden boxes. It was there, behind old agricultural manuals and cataloged magazines, that she found the metal cases. Their faded labels read, "Haven Creek, Land Deeds, 1865 to 1890. Every morning started the same. A warm cup of tea from Hadley. A notebook, gloves. And the archives." Naomi worked like a surgeon, clipping articles, copying maps, sketching out plot lines on thin drafting paper. To an outsider, it looked like the dullest kind of work. But beneath her fingers, a picture began to form, one that challenged everything the town thought it knew. She found proof that the lots where the church now stood it, where Tom Banks' store stood it, where the courthouse was built, had once belonged to a single, unified tract of land, registered under the name of Samuel Ellis. But the most telling detail lay in the minutes of the newly formed Town Development Committee from 1870. The names were clear, the signatures tidy, but her great-grandfather's name? Nowhere to be found. "Funny what you can bury just by rewriting paper," she murmured one day, staring at a deed whose date didn't match the surrounding boundary revisions. When Daniel stopped by the library that afternoon, she laid a map in front of him. "Here," she said. "The land was meant for freed citizens. But in the end, it went right back to the same men who already owned half this town." He stood silent for a long while, eyes scanning the evidence. Finally, he said softly, "If this is true, Naomi, this isn't just history. This is a powder keg." She looked at him, calm and clear. "No, this is a foundation for building something honest, on top of a lie that's lasted too long." From that day forward, the library wasn't just where she worked. It became her headquarters. On a gray, rain-soaked day, the kind where every drop against the window sounds like dirt hitting a coffin lid, Naomi found a document that made her heart stop. It was the original land grant, dated April 1866, a match to the copy she'd carried in her suitcase. But this one was marked with the official state seal, Treasury red ink, and, most importantly, a name, Samuel Ellis, her great-grandfather. She sat down slowly, smoothing the page with trembling hands. It wasn't the chill in the air that made the paper shake. It was the weight of what it meant. The grant confirmed the transfer of 320 acres on the eastern edge of Haven Creek, in recognition of service in the Union Army and acknowledgement of full citizenship. Below that, a list of parcel numbers, one by one. But just 4 years later, a different document reallocated those same parcels, this time to the Town Development Committee. The very names now etched on store windows, bank plaques, and office doors around the square. Naomi's brow tightened. She moved to the next drawer and found a set of letters, a correspondence between the committee chair and a circuit judge. One yellowed letter read, "Given the lack of a legal heir, we recommend an expedited reassignment of the plots to the committee." She pressed the letter to her chest. Her great-grandfather hadn't vanished. He'd been pushed out. Quietly. Systematically. He didn't lose the land. It had been taken from him. With paperwork, signatures, and official stamps. And now that truth was resting in her hands. Naomi carefully laid the documents beside the copies she'd brought from home. The dates lined up. The maps matched. The names were clear. Tom Banks. Pastor Madison. Town Hall. All of it stood on Ellis land. "Oh my God," she whispered. This wasn't just stolen property. It was stolen history. Scrubbed clean by someone else's pen. And now, restored by hers. She closed her eyes. How many times had her grandfather said it? Remember, they won't drive us out with violence. They'll erase us with silence. But now she had a voice. And more than that, she had proof. And with those two things came the obligation to act. The town hall of Haven Creek had never seen a crowd like this. The same walls that usually echoed with dry reports and dull budget talk now pulsed with voices nervous, uncertain, uneasy. In the front row sat the town's oldest families. Tom Banks was seated closest to the podium, fists clenched, eyes darting, anxious. Daniel Stanton stood at the front. Next to him, Naomi Brooks. She wasn't holding a speech. She was holding a leather case, its edge worn, documents neatly stacked inside. "Thank you for having us," Daniel began. His voice was calm, but heavy like a storm building over distant hills. "We didn't come here to stir conflict. We came to shed light on what's been forgotten. Or worse, deliberately buried." Murmurs swept through the crowd. A few exchanged glances. Someone scoffed under their breath. Naomi stepped forward. "My name is Naomi Brooks. I'm a teacher. I was raised on stories about a man this town no longer names, though his history runs beneath every street, every lot of land you walk on. His name was Samuel Ellis. He was my great-grandfather." She pulled a document from her case and held it high for all to see. "This is an original land grant, dated 1866. The state awarded land in Haven Creek to my great-grandfather, as a free citizen and a Union veteran. That's how gratitude looked back then." And then it came silence. "That's a lie," Tom shouted, rising to his feet. His voice shook. "Those papers are fake. She's just here to tear our town apart, to ruin what we built." "Let's not jump to accusations," came a steady voice from the back of the room. It was Judge Burton, a man with silver hair, a lifetime on the bench, and a name that still meant something. He walked slowly to the front. "Miss Brooks sent me copies last week. I cross-checked them with county archives. I also requested validation from the State Historical Records Commission." He opened a folder from his briefcase and looked up. "The documents are real, and they confirm that a significant portion of this town, homes, churches, businesses, was originally granted to a man named Samuel Ellis." Silence fell, so thick it hummed. Somewhere, a pin hit the floor. Naomi's voice didn't tremble. "I didn't come here asking for evictions. I'm not here for revenge. But if this town wants to be honest, then it has to face the truth and find a way to restore justice without burning everything down." Tom shot to his feet again. "This is outrageous. What's next? Hand over all of Haven Creek? Rename the streets? Give me back my store as some kind of penance?" Naomi looked at him calm, steady. "I never asked for your store, Tom. But maybe it's time you thought about how you got it." Daniel stepped forward to stand beside her. "My library holds nearly every deed in this county, except for a few years, 1870 through 1872. Those records are missing." But Miss Brooks found cross-references. She didn't come looking for a fight. She came looking for the truth. A woman in the crowd whispered, barely audible, This can't be. My grandfather served on that committee. He never said a word." "Sometimes silence isn't a virtue," Naomi replied gently. "It's complicity." Judge Burton nodded solemnly. "This needs to be handled openly. I propose we form a temporary commission." one focused on fair and just restoration. Miss Brooks should have a seat at that table. The room erupted. Some clapped. Some stood in stunned disbelief. And Tom, his fire extinguished, slowly sank back into his chair. He realized something, perhaps for the first time. You can rewrite history, but eventually history starts speaking for itself. Later, after the hall had emptied and the last footsteps faded into the corridors of Town Hall, Daniel caught up to Naomi out on the steps. Twilight had settled over Haven Creek gently, like the sky itself was offering the town a moment to breathe after a storm. You could have asked for everything, he said quietly. The land, compensation, a lawsuit, and no one could have said you didn't have the right. Why didn't you? Naomi looked at him, then at the glowing windows scattered across the hills in the distance. Because I didn't come here to repeat their path, Daniel. I didn't come to take using the same tools they used to steal. She tightened her grip on the folder of documents, her voice steady. Justice isn't destruction. It's repair. It's giving a town a chance to become better, not punishing it for the past. He nodded slowly. In his eyes was more than understanding. There was respect. Naomi hadn't come to avenge. She came to remind people that truth wasn't a whip. It was a light that shows the way out. A few days after the meeting, Naomi once again stood at the front of the town hall. But this time, she wasn't holding accusations. She was offering a path forward. The same faces filled the room, but the air had changed. Where there was tension, now there was quiet anticipation. Where there was resistance, now there was listening. I'm not here to demand the land back, she began calmly. My great-grandfather dreamed that his labor would build a future, not just for his children, but for every child who would come after. She unrolled a map and a hand-drawn plan. I'm proposing the creation of the Ellis Foundation. Its purpose will be to provide scholarships for local youth, to help restore our schools, and offer housing to families living beyond hope. This isn't payment for guilt. It's an investment in tomorrow. A hush moved through the room. Some struggled to understand how someone who had been owed so much could ask for nothing. We can't change the past, Naomi said, but we can decide what to do with the truth. We can bury it again, or we can grow something good from it. Tom sat in the back, slumped, lips pressed into a hard line. No one turned to him for comment. Not because he stayed silent, but because his words no longer mattered. This wasn't a legal victory. It was something deeper. It was a victory of meaning. Naomi hadn't torn Haven Creek apart. She had given it back its face. And in the moment the room rose. Not with thunderous applause, but with quiet, heartfelt respect. Tom finally understood. He hadn't lost to a woman. He'd lost to a conscience. Spring didn't arrive in Haven Creek just through blossoms and birdsong. It came in quiet gestures. In the way folks started nodding to Naomi Brooks on the street. Soft-spoken words that carried more weight than they seemed. Thank you for staying. We didn't know. The Ellis Foundation began its work within a month. Its first steps, scholarships for low-income families, repairs to the old schoolhouse library, and a new night education center for adults. The building that once hosted only dinner parties and formal receptions now echoed with the voices of teachers, librarians, and teens solving algebra under the shadow of velvet curtains. Stanton's estate transformed. It was no longer just the home of a reclusive farmer. It became the Ellis Cultural Center, a space where history, music, and memory intertwined. Mrs. Hadley organized a women's literacy group, and Pastor Madison, once guarded and reserved, now gave sermons on repentance and what he called a new covenant rooted in justice, not tradition. Tom Banks slipped away quietly, sold the store, closed the shutters. They said he moved to the next county, took a job as a bookkeeping assistant. His name no longer came up in meetings. The building he once owned, it became the new Samuel Ellis Public Library. Naomi didn't greet that irony with mockery. She saw it for what it was, a symbol that even what was built on injustice could be turned into something good. The town hadn't changed overnight, but it had begun to learn how to live with the truth, not as a threat, but as a foundation. And that was the real victory, not in tearing something down, but in reshaping it. Quietly, honestly, irreversibly. Naomi was walking across the market square when an older man approached her. hands calloused, ball cap faded from years of sun. She recognized him, Merle Henderson, one of the stone-faced men from the meeting. Never said a word, just sat, arms crossed. He removed his cap, held it in both hands. Miss Brooks, I wasn't kind. Not at the station. Not after. Sometimes we don't realize right away that truth doesn't tear us down. It sets us straight. Naomi didn't speak. She just looked at him. Carefully. Patiently. He nodded. My grandson goes to that new school now. Reads the signs out loud to me. Looks at me like I'm someone worth looking up to. And I just wanted to say thank you. He held out his hand. And when Naomi shook it, it wasn't just a gesture. It was acknowledgement. Daniel and Naomi walked slowly through the garden. Now a public park filled with green benches and children's laughter. On a far hill stood what used to be Tom Banks' store. Now the town library, where kids flipped through books in the sunlight, their voices echoing through glass windows. You could have destroyed him, Daniel said quietly. Taken everything. The town would have stood behind you. Naomi smiled faintly. I still ahead. And what would that have made me? Another person who tears things down instead of building them up. Tom didn't lose his money, she added. He lost what mattered most to him. The illusion that his name meant something. Now it's just a shadow on a wall. An echo. She paused beside a bed of asters in bloom. I used to think justice felt like anger. But it turns out, it feels like this. When someone is left alone with a truth they can't deny anymore. Daniel nodded. He's gone now. Moved to Spring Hill. I heard he works the register at a supply store. Keeps to himself. Folks don't use his name, just a receipt number. Naomi looked up at the building where the foundation now lived. You know the strange part? I don't hate him. I pity him. He spent his whole life building on a lie. And now, there's nothing solid left for him to stand on. They kept walking, step by step, toward the sound of children, and a future that no longer asked who you used to be, but only what you were willing to become. In the heart of Haven Creek, on the square where the old founder's obelisk once stood, there was now a simple bronze plaque. Not a monument, not a pedestal, just a flat stone at the base of a wide old oak. It read, "In memory of Samuel Ellis, whose land became the foundation of Haven Creek. His labor is our debt, his name our conscience." At the unveiling, children in school uniforms stood beside women with baskets, and old men in folding chairs. No applause, just quiet, respect, understanding. Naomi gave talks at the local school now. About law, about land, about the kind of history that had been silent for too long. And the students listened, not with pity, but with attention, with questions, and, for many, with gratitude. Young teachers asked for her materials. Journalists came for interviews. Students wrote papers on property rights and justice. Naomi never set out to be a hero, but in this town, they now understood something. Every true change carries a name, and this one's name was Naomi Brooks. In the gardens outside the cultural center, children ran between flower beds where only servants once walked. Now every step was equal, every laugh free. Mrs. Hadley sat on a bench, knitting, watching the old building breathe with new life. And Daniel Stanton led visitors through the library, pointing out where the rebirth began. During one open lesson, Naomi told her students, "Greatness doesn't come from color. It comes from what a person does, especially when truth gets uncomfortable." And in Haven Creek, that truth was no longer buried. It was etched into plaques. It was taught in schools. It was planted in gardens, to grow with every new generation. If this story of dignity, justice, and quiet strength touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time on Heartland Stories.